welcome back to Interjections post Supercoppa. Inter fall to Milan 3-2. Jay is brimming with glee, ready to break this thing down. We're gonna dive straight into things today because we're on a bit of a time crunch. Miko was too ashamed and embarrassed of Inter to bother showing up for this episode, so we've got Sterling filling in for him.
This is Aslan's reckoning day, so let's go ahead and get to the judgment.
Irfan is here to defend Aslani's honor, so we'll have a good debate about it.
Absolutely.
So I've been clear. I do not care about the Supercoppa. That's not revisionist history. I've said it the past two episodes. This competition in its new watered down format means nothing to me. All of my gripes and complaints about this match, and there will be several, are going to be framed with the thought towards how is that going to impact Inter's ability to go win a Scudetto and go far in the Champions League. Because yesterday was a complete meltdown, and there are conclusions you can take from it for the remainder of our season. Because we were outclassed in every facet of the game yesterday. That was a deserved Milan victory. As I was watching the match and we went up 1-0, I was thinking to myself casually, hey, this is kind of an undeserved lead. And then we grab another goal right after the half. And I was like, okay, this is now extremely undeserved. And when you look at the advanced stats, they back up that assertion. Milan, 3xG, we had 1.8. But it's fine. You're allowed to win games when you aren't maybe the better side. Lautaro had a truly great moment when he scored his first goal. And sometimes that's all you need to win a game. And you're feeling all right when you have a 2-0 lead. But there was never a point in this match where we had control of it. I thought we were going to lose this match. I predicted us to lose this match because with thuram outs, we were going to struggle to score goals. We were supposed to struggle to score goals with two out-of-form strikers up top. But both those strikers score goals. You take a 2-0 lead. And that leads me to gripe number one with this performance, which is this team cannot stop conceding goals late in matches. If you go through it, and it's only the big games, only the matches that matters, this team continues to concede late goals. We gave Leverkusen a goal in the 90th minute. We've allowed 80th minute goals to Yildiz and Juventus, Pulisic and Milan. And then again, against Milan, we've allowed 89th and 90th minute goals to Gavia and Tammy Abraham. I thought we had turned a corner with the clean sheets we've kept against Como and Kyrie and these recent matches ever since the Juve game. We've talked about how we buttoned down the league, only conceded one goal in the league after the Juve disaster. But we were just back to our normal selves yesterday. And every time we play an opponent worth a damn, when it matters most, we're conceding goals and we're conceding late goals. And it's the complete opposite of what we were doing last year when we had the dominant record of never conceding in the last 15 minutes of matches. It's officially a problem, and it's a level of concentration and determination we aren't seeing. Their individual errors, it's carelessly giving away the ball, it's failing to mark man. It's not great, guys. We can sit down and go through each individual goal. I'm sure we're going to talk about the third goal, which good luck, Irfan, convincing me that the third goal is not on Aslani. I have not seen enough people complain about Lautaro's dismal efforts on the first goal as the quote-unquote part of the wall on the free kick. That was pathetic, but at the end of the day, Summer not nearly good enough. And when you look at all these goals we're conceding, you just have to ask yourself, where is the concentration? Where's the killer instinct? Where's that champion's DNA we're always talking about that we thought we ironed out last year when we won a Scudetto? Which leads me to my next gripe, which is Inzaghi does not manage these games like he is a big game manager. There's too much cowardice in the way he manages these games when you're in a knockout match or you're playing a rival. The decision to take off Barella yesterday was inexcusable. I don't care that Barella is on a yellow card. He is one of the 5 best midfielders in the world. You have 8 minutes left in a game that's going to penalties directly after full time, and you take him off, and you can't you can't do that because he has a booking. You have to trust him. You have to rely on your best players, especially when you're already down Hakan. If we were winning the match, I'd be able to buy it. You might be able to convince me, hey, we don't want any dumb foul. We don't want to let them back in the match. But in a tied match, absolutely not. And the kicker is he did the exact same thing. Inzaghi did the exact same thing in September against Milan when he subbed off our entire midfield. He subbed off Mkhitaryan because he was booked. He subbed off Hakan because he was booked. And then he subbed off Barella. In the September fixture, he put on Aslani and Fertesi, and guess what happened? It's not a coincidence. I don't know what Inzaghi was doing yesterday from a substitution standpoint. I was going to complain about him taking off De Vrij, but apparently De Vrij is injured, so he'll get a pass for that. So I'll use this as an opportunity to thank Oaktree again for giving us Palacios, someone who Inzaghi would rather throw out Darmian into an unnatural position than trust it as an actual normal center back. So thank you for that. And then my third gripe is the Aslani Fertesi situation, where I'm done with both these guys, and putting them together on the pitch at the same time is a death wish. And we've seen this enough times now. We have enough evidence to know this doesn't work. I don't want to open up the Aslani stuff too much right now, but I don't know what this guy is good at. Aside from occasionally hitting long balls over the top, which, nice skill, good skill. What else does this guy do? He takes too long on the ball. He cannot dictate tempo from the midfield. And he's too easily pressed. And we cannot retain possession with him on the pitch, especially when Fertesi is beside him, who is allergic to being on the ball and is only capable of making runs. So Inzaghi's substitutions to me yesterday said he was trying to survive. He was trying to make it to penalties. He was trying to get guys on the pitch who could maybe take a penalty. And as a result, we didn't even manage to get there because he melted down and put a horrible lineup out there. So as I reframe this and try and think about how this is going to impact the rest of the season, I've got 3 big takeaways. One is we still have not beaten a good team this year in Italy outside of Atalanta. We cannot beat Milan, we cannot beat Juve, and we haven't beaten Napoli. 2 is we managed to lose both Thuram and Hakan to injury in what is ultimately a pointless competition. And that's going to mean extended Taremi, and that's going to mean extended Aslani. And I don't like our chances with either of those guys starting regularly. But shout out to Taremi for scoring a goal yesterday. And then the point Jay is going to be most obsessed with, I'm positive, is that we've given this Milan side a massive boost. They have a new manager. They have a trophy. They have some swagger back to them. They've beaten us twice in a row. And that air of mystery we had, that psychological edge we had over these guys is completely gone. There is no chance Milan are going to win the Scudetto. There are too many points back. There are too many teams in front of them. It's not happening. But our inability to beat them is going to be a pain this season, especially because we have another league fixture against them. They're running high on confidence, and who knows what they're able to accomplish under Conceição. So, garbage performance yesterday, thoroughly outplayed. Jay, I will let you have fun with this.
I think that was a brilliant opening, and you encapsulated a lot of the talking points and the concerns very succinctly. I would be remiss not to congratulate the superior opponent on the day, and without being my usual facetious self, Lautaro himself gave a very, very mature response when asked what went wrong, and he basically said that we didn't handle being in the lead well, and obviously that we failed to take our chances when we were in the lead or even when we were at 2-2, and that Milan simply wanted it more. and I think that's undeniably true. Not to be a slave to these statistics, but Milan's xG was 3 against our xG, which was 1.8, and I think allowing or conceding 3 xG is fucking wild to begin with. But when you look at the balance of play, you can say, oh, we had a Carlos Augusto chance cleared off the line, and Fratesi or Dumfries or Martinez all missing decent chances. But I think when you kind of look at the chances that Milan had, I don't think there's any argument that they were more dangerous than us across the game, and eventually came out deserved winners. You're right in saying the confidence that we gave to them is going to be one of my biggest gripes, or one of my biggest areas of frustration. But it's all tied into, look, you can lose, you can be beaten, but it's always disappointing to be outfought and to be beaten by an opponent who simply wants it more than you. And you have to question, why do these guys want it more than us? Look, at the end of the day, everyone wants to win. That's what makes it a contest. That's a definition of competition. But are these guys' bellies full after one Scudetto and getting eliminated in the round of 16 in the Champions League, a Coppa Italia? Is that enough for these guys? I'm not expecting a Bayern-like domination of 10 leagues in a row or anything like that. But it seems like any time this team gets on a good run, the good form, the praise kind of gets to their heads, and they start doing things like this. And that does tie me into, I guess, the long-term implications of losing a game like this, in relation to enabling a opponent and a dangerous rival. And I said literally a few days ago that these two teams, Juventus and Milan, were fucking shit. And watching the first game, that's certainly the case. This game, obviously, they played much better. And that's a kind of common sentiment of the detractors. And we don't know what this Conceição Milan is going to look like in the long run, obviously. But that was one of the criticisms, obviously, labelled at Fonseca, and why he doesn't have a job now. But it kind of doesn't matter if they play like shit against Torino, or if they lose to Atalanta or whatever, because, yes, obviously the league is not won in the two derbies against Milan. The league is won against the other 19 teams, and how many points we rack up in the other 36 games in the season. But, a rivalry like the Milan derby, a rivalry this intense against two top teams of, long-standing prestige and of such a stature, that kind of rivalry it's like a kind of war that doesn't end. And the way in which we've allowed them to win the last two derbies, and in doing so, yes, give them a massive confidence boost, and yes, make them a much bigger headache for us moving forward. That shows a bit of immaturity, some weakness on our part. I really do think that no matter the occasion, you need to show up 110% for any derby, and it puzzles me and it frustrates me greatly that we haven't done so. That in 2 games against Milan, we have been second best in, again, not just the technical or the fitness or the tactical component, but the simple motivation department. The fact that we are so clearly second best and wanting to win is, a great concern. And I guess the paradigm I'm seeing is we're at a certain level where in the league most teams are manageable and not too much of a threat, so we just bulldoze all of them. But when there's like a big opponent, we have this like imposter syndrome and we can't handle it. And that's the way we look like against the big teams this season. You said it 100% correctly when you said we haven't beaten a single good team this season aside from Atalanta and I guess Arsenal. That too, very unconvincingly. But the true mettle of a champion is not just this kind of steamrolling small teams. I think to really reach this top echelon, you have to beat the rivals and the 6-pointers in their direct head-to-heads, because these are the games that not only will obviously win you those 6-point encounters, but these are the games that win you the psychological battle. These are the teams that kind of entrench you in a position of mental superiority, in a position of confidence, in a and in the later stages of tournaments, domestic and continental. You're not going to face Venezia or Fiorentina when you get to like the round of 16 in the Champions League. You're not going to face Empoli or Cagliari in the Coppa Italia semi-finals or in the Supercoppa. You're going to face the Milans, the Juves, the Napolis, the Leverkusens, and so on. And when you consistently fail to impress against these kinds of teams, again, it just shows where this season seemingly just managing to kind of deceive by getting past the teams that were expected to get past, and then just really shitting the bed against the true rivals. And that to me is the most disappointing thing, because it's very much a case of look, this guy talks the talk but doesn't walk the walk. Like I said, imposter syndrome there. It's a case of like, yes, we'll get by beating 80% of the teams, but again, the top 20%, top 10% that's where the glory is. And ultimately what it just shows is this team cannot overcome obstacles over a certain size, and that's the most disappointing outcome to take away from it. Well, looks like Sterling dropped out. While we wait for him to reconnect, let's move to Irfan. Give us your impassioned defense of Aslani. The one thing I'll say about him before we hand you the reins is, I didn't even mention his name in my big rant, and the reason for that is I don't have anything more to say that we haven't already said. I think Irfan is entirely right when he will inevitably say that to pin everything on Aslani is just idiotic. But at the same time, I agree with everything Andrew said as well. So, like it or not, the reality of the role of a deep line playmaker in Inzaghi's system is that you need to be excellent at several things, and the fact that he isn't really hurts us. And beyond that, like I said, there's nothing new for me to add to that discussion. So, Irfan, please.
Yeah, look, I'm obviously I'm known as the Aslani supporter here, but I'm going to put that kind of hat away for a second and not just dive right into it. I'll say this about the match. It was extremely frustrating, not because of the result, not because of the game, not because that the game matters or that we missed out on a trophy. I'll even say it's not frustrating because I don't actually buy into this argument that we've somehow emboldened Milan or they're somehow more confident in some way. Look, anytime you lose a derby, it sucks. And when you lose the way we lost, it sucks, right? Like I think most of us, if we had lose this match in like some impassioned 1-0 result, or if we had gone to penalties and lost there, I don't think anyone would have really given too much of a shit. Like, yes, whenever you lose to a rival, it sucks. But the way we lost and the manner in which we lost, I think, is what's most frustrating. And so I kind of want to focus on the stuff that actually, in my opinion, matters, which is that we gave up a 2-goal lead again. And I know, Andrew, you talked about this in your opener, but we did the same thing against Juventus. And I think in a similar manner, right? It's the defense just being completely lost and it's speed just killing us, right? I mean, in this match, to me, it comes down to one thing, which is basically subbing in Leao in like the 50th minute after we had gone up 2-0. And nothing was essentially the same after that. We had no answer in defense. Our players were tired. The midfield, again, was not good enough. We missed chances. We generated a lot of chances. We missed chances to put them away. Once again, the lack of killer instinct in finishing is just killing us, especially against good teams. And so, again, I think it's very similar to the way we've lost or drawn other matches. You know what was not similar, though, is if you look at the Juventus match, we gave up 2 goals late, right, to Yildiz, mainly because of issues with his speed and defense. Guess who was not on the pitch for us during those 2 goals? And that's Aslani. He didn't play that match at all, right? So my issue with the constant Aslani refrain, Jay touched on this a second ago, is simply that it's lazy, right? Like everyone knows he's not good enough for Inter. Even I realize that, right? But he's also a backup. He's not your starter. He's not your starter right center back who was getting shredded the entire match yesterday. I didn't hear anyone in the opening 20 or so minutes talk about Bisek. I thought this was Bisek's worst performance that he's had for us. Now, you could argue that he was put into immense pressure because the midfield couldn't hold or defend anything, and that's fine. I really like Bisek. I think he has a great future. One bad game doesn't change anything. But the fact that, like, whenever Aslani's on the pitch, all of the discussion just centers on how Aslani sucks. It's like, that's lazy, guys, because Bisek got owned the entire match. The defense was in shambles the entire match. Summer was horrible on that first goal. Like, you can see him literally take a step in the wrong direction where the wall is covering, and then he tries to leap to the side where the free kick actually went. So, like, that's inexcusable. And so many times during the match, Summer was like way out of his like line, way out of position, leaving the goal wide open. Like, there's that one play where Milan actually didn't score, where like Liao once again completely and utterly shredded Bisek. Like, it was not even close. Okay, and then he squares the ball off because Summer is in no man's land, and then Bastoni's head basically ends up saving the day. Otherwise, Rangers would have scored. So again, I think that this match comes down to the same sort of muscle memory issues that we've seen from this team before. To blame it on Aslani, I think, is stupid, though we can obviously talk about how he's not good enough, and he isn't. But I think the main issue here is I think this is the one gap in Inzaghi's game planning and Inzaghi's management that he still hasn't fixed. And you guys talked about it a little bit, which is that he's just not courageous. He's not confident. And some of his substitutions are too mechanical. He doesn't react enough to what's going on the pitch. And I think part of the problem is maybe a personnel problem, though he'll never admit it because, he is ownership and management's kind of, good boy at the end of the day. But if you look at Milan's team and you look at Juventus's team, and you look at a lot of these other teams that we play, like look at Atlanta, for God's sake, they have so much firepower off the bench. Like, if they need a goal, if they're down and they need a goal, they can go to a few people. If we're down and we need a goal, we literally have one or two options. Neither of them are direct scoring options, which is we'll put in Fratesi, which we talked about results in a massive black hole in our midfield, or we'll try to put in like Augusto, who can find themselves in really good attacking positions, but you can't rely on that kind of a player to score a goal when you need. So I think part of the problem is that we don't have anyone on the bench that's creative or anyone that can come in. Maybe if Correa was healthy, would have been different. But jokes aside, I think that's one big problem, and then our inability to deal with speed is a massive, massive issue. And the last thing I'll say is Bastoni was also really poor down the stretch in this match defensively. And him and DeMarco, as great as they both are, they both really only have the legs for about 65, 70 minutes, which is why it's no coincidence that they're usually some of the first people that are pulled by Inzaghi, because they don't have the legs to go the full match. And so here, Andrew talked about how completely mind-boggling it was to pull Barella. Pulling Barella is really one of the kisses of death for this team. I can't think of a time where we pull him where we don't end up conceding or we don't end up playing much, much worse. The other kiss of death really is letting Bastoni or DeMarco play for too long in the match, because there's a precipitous drop off in their quality if they play past the 70 minutes. So again, I'm not concerned about the loss. It irritates me in the manner in which we lost because it's more of the same. If this was some outlier, like, I wouldn't really care because, like Andrew said, I don't think that this tournament means anything. But the manner in which we lost, which seems to be like a pattern, is what irritates me the most. And I know there's going to be a segment of fans that are going to do the kind of intellectually lazy thing and just focus everything on Aslani, and I just don't think that that's accurate. And honestly, I think it's not. It kind of detracts from some of the real issues that this team has. And there's not a lot of real issues that this team has, but there are a few. And I think one of them is Inzaghi's ability to manage in a really, really tough sort of game, and his ability to hold a lead late when the other team is actually bringing on real firepower, right? Like when we play these shitty clubs, mid-tier clubs, they don't have the type of firepower off the bench to overcome a 1 goal, let alone 2 goal deficit. But some of the better teams that we play, they will have that. They will have that killer instinct or that player or two to come off the bench. And Inzaghi so far has no answer for that, and we don't have an answer for that. And I think that's the biggest concern down the stretch. But I don't think ultimately this game matters at all for our Scudetto chances or for our ability to perform in the Champions League. Doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. I don't think Milan is somehow now unbeatable or anything like that. I mean, it took one of our best players and one of the best holding midfielders in Europe to be injured for them to essentially have a chance against us. So I'm not concerned about that. I still think that first loss to Fonseca's Milan in the league was a much worse result for us, and the Juventus loss, or the Juventus draw, which was effectively just a loss, was probably a much, much worse result than this was.
Sterling's joined. We'll go back to him.
Yeah, so Jay, you mentioned a good thing about talking the talk, because what I keep hearing is that we're one of the best teams in Europe. And I keep hearing it from our players. I've heard it from Çalhanoğlu, I've heard it from Thuram recently, but unfortunately, I don't really see it on the pitch this season. As you mentioned, we've not really won a lot of these big games that we've been in. We've really only won two, once against Atalanta, once against Arsenal. Kind of each their own story, obviously. Atalanta, I don't really consider to be a big team historically. Obviously, they've had a great, decade or so in terms of overperforming, but certainly not somebody I would consider to be at the level of a Milan or a Juventus or any of these teams we're going to play in the Champions League. And the Arsenal, I will give us credit for. That was it was a 1-0 victory, but we got a penalty, and we were able to see it out. But outside of that, I really don't see where this thought is that we are somewhat superior to 99% of the teams that are running around at the moment. I think that we are definitely a good team. We have to give credit to the fact that before today's match, we were on a hot run. I believe in the last 5 matches, we were 15 goals scored, 0 goals conceded. However, I still see a mentality issue that's concerning to me when we get into these moments where the pressure gets ratcheted up. Yesterday's match reminded me a lot of the away match to Atletico last season, where we got punched in the mouth and all of a sudden we didn't know how to react. And it seemed like there was chaos. In both matches, something similar happens. We take the lead. Yesterday it was 2 goals. Last time it was 1 goal. But in both times we take a lead and then we immediately give up an equalizer shortly after. Or yesterday we gave up a goal shortly after we scored the second. And then from there, the match is absolute chaos, and it's opened up, and we lose our composure, and we start giving up massive chance after massive chance. There's no reason that a team that gave up 0 goals in the last 5 games should be giving up 3 xG to Milan. Milan is a good team. They do have a new manager bounce, or I should say, they're a talented team. They haven't been a good team this season, but there is talent in Milan. There's always going to be talent in these big teams, even when they're having a down year. They do have enough money to where they will garner some talented players, but there's no reason that we should be giving up the chances that we gave up yesterday. And again, I think it goes down to mentality. When this team gets rattled, we still capitulate. And that's something that I think is concerning, not just for yesterday's match, but if we're looking forward into what it means for the rest of our season, I certainly think that that's going to come and rear its head again in a Champions League fixture at some point. You have to be able to go on the road, away from home, and be able to withstand these moments where things just don't go your way. And so that's a little bit concerning to me moving forward. The other thing I think that's concerning to me is that we do have an issue, I think, with depth in our midfield. Even looking at Milan's midfield options, you could argue that they actually have a little bit more depth than us. They can bring Benacer and Loftus-Cheek off the bench, and we're bringing Aslani and Fortezi and Zielinski. Zielinski obviously is a good player, and so I think that that's probably where we do have a little bit more strength is in that one position. But when we have to bring in Aslani, when we have to bring in Fratesi, we have some serious issues. Fratesi, listen, he is a player I was excited about. $35 million signing. He's one of our more expensive signings in recent memory. I thought that he was going to bring a lot of dynamism to the team. He does score goals. He does have his strengths as a player, but I think it's become very clear that he's just not the right fit for this team. He's terrible on the ball. He's not very good defensively. He's just not a great Inzaghi player. And he's behind Barella, and that's a tough place to be. And honestly, he's not going to get enough minutes here, it looks like, to really develop. And so I think it's probably for the best that he does move on in the summer. I think that's probably what will happen. And then Aslani. Listen, I don't see what we've ever seen in this guy. I think that he was a bargain opportunity that we took from Empoli when we should have gotten Ricci in the first place. But I listen, he's not athletic enough. He's slow on the turn. He can't tackle anybody. He's always chasing shadows. Technically, he's not poor by any means. He is a decent technical player, but his technique is not to the point where I would say that it's leaps and bounds above most Serie A midfielders. There's a certain standard here. He's certainly better than Fratesi, but he's not Xavi. He's not someone to write home about technically either. And his speed of thought is just not at the level necessary to play in the regista role at this point. And I don't really think he's ever really been a regista. I know that we kind of shoehorned him into that role, but I don't really think it's ever been a perfect fit for him. And honestly, anytime he comes onto the pitch, I see a massive drop in confidence. The team doesn't seem to really believe that much in him. I don't think that Inzaghi really believes that much in him, which is why he has played Zielinski in that role previously. It's why Çalhanoğlu played when Brozovic went out. And obviously now that's his full-time position. There's a reason why Inzaghi has been hesitant to use him. And I think the truth is that he's just not of the quality to be a part of this Inter. And listen, I'll say this. I think that players should be able to learn at Inter. I do think that there's room for younger players to be able to make some mistakes, but those players need to ultimately have the potential to be part of Inter. They need to be building towards something. They need to show me something in terms of, yeah, this is a guy who has the quality to be an Inter player. I've never seen it with Aslani. He just does not have the quality to be here. And listen, if he goes somewhere else for 4 years, 5 years, and he really works and he grows as a player, could he eventually end up in a big club? Sure, that happens. Some people can make it into a bigger club towards the back half of their 20s. Some of them maybe even will make it in their 30s, but he's not anywhere near the standard that's needed right now for this Inter team. And anytime he comes on, there's just a massive drop in quality. So I would say, yeah, yesterday, mentality issue, but also a quality in depth issue as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's fair. Ultimately, even as one of Aslani's biggest supporters, I think, there's a couple things happening there. First of all, I think, like you, Sterling, actually put in some nuance and some thought behind your criticisms of him, and that's all I really ask for, because I just don't want this lazy analysis that he sucks, and then that's it, and everything that happens on the pitch is his fault. Because not only is that lazy, I think it prevents a conversation from actually discussing what's going on, which is that it's not Aslani's problem. It's a problem that we have against better teams and in our inability to kind of contain them and to hold leads, right? I mean, that's the real issue here. It's the same thing that happened against Juventus when Aslani wasn't on the pitch. Like I said, he didn't play at all, and we gave up those 2 goals to Yildiz. So there is definitely a drop-off when you go from Hakan to Aslani. I don't think he is a natural regista. And I think the problem with Aslani is actually very similar to the problem that we have with Fratesi. People just don't talk as much about Fratesi because he's not as simple of a scapegoat, and because we paid a lot more for him, and because he has some kind of sexy qualities in the fact that he, can score goals, including some late goals. But the problem is that in Inzaghi's system, that three-man midfield, each midfielder just does so much. And I think this is the first year that I actually recognize that with someone like Mkhitaryan, right? Like, they just do so much, each of those three players, that it is virtually impossible, at least with our budget, to find a player that can be a serviceable backup for either of those three consistently, right? Zelensky is probably the closest thing that we have to somebody who can come in, and we don't, maybe we lose 9 out of the 10 things that each of those guys does, but not all 10 things. I think the problem with Aslani and with Fratesi is that the midfield just becomes a black hole when those guys are on, because they just can't do enough of what they need to do to cover what the starters were doing. And that leads to a lot of frustration, and I get it. But again, we generated a lot yesterday against Milan with Aslani on the pitch. And we can't just say all the stuff we generated was, in spite or again, even the against what Aslani was doing, in spite of Aslani. And then you look at Aslani and you blame him for every goal that you concede, and everything we conceded was directly because of him. That's the sort of analysis I don't like. But I don't disagree that there's a drop off and there's a quality issue in our midfield when it comes to the backups. And part of the problem is that the three starters we have, they do play so well and they're so good at what they do that it's hard for us to be able to go out and get a serviceable backup. I honestly don't know, and I think we talked about this a little bit on the podcast. We don't really know what Fratesi's role was going to be here. Like, was it going to be as a backup to Barella? And honestly, their skill sets are actually quite different. I actually think if we were to go out and swap Fratesi, or sell him and buy somebody who could be a better backup for Hakan, and then keep Aslani as kind of like an auxiliary backup to someone like Barella, that's probably a better use of our midfield than it is to, keep relying on Fratesi. But again, Aslani is not someone we need to keep. I'm fine with him going as long as we get a serviceable backup in his return. But again, I don't think you're saying this, but I don't think anyone really thinks that Aslani is the reason we lost this match yesterday. I think there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and it's a pattern, like Andrew said, and that's the one thing I think we need to address. That's really my only takeaway from this match. I don't really have anything else because it was just a useless match.
Aslani is certainly not the sole reason, but he is a reason, and he was a pretty big reason yesterday. I mean, okay, so let's start with the first goal, right? So Aslani receives the ball, and in our half, but somewhat towards the halfway line. Um, all he needs to do is essentially take a touch and switch the ball. Instead, he dawdles on it. It is a foul. Okay,
Yes,
Morata
it's a
does
foul.
foul him.
Yep.
It is a foul. There's no doubt about it. But the issue is that it never should have gotten to that point in the first place. He allows the referee to make a decision that he never should have had to make in the first place. He should have been able to get the ball out from under his feet and make a pass before he was pressed. And that
And what did
situation
he do?
there is
What did
what
he do
leads
to?
to the entire that's what leads to the entire situation though. That and then
Okay, that's fine. But then
Mkhitaryan
what did he
has
do?
to then
What did he
foul.
do to Summer?
What
Did he get in Summer's way or something? Summer couldn't make a simple save on the free kick. Come on.
So listen, Summer is 100% a part of that goal as well. There's no doubt about that. It's his first post, and he was the one who made the wall. And Lautaro was not great in the wall either. And yeah, ultimately, the ball hitting the back of the net is Summer, 100%. But the situation that led to it in the first place, 100% avoidable, and it does come from Aslani. And I don't think anyone can tell me otherwise. I mean, you guys all watched the match. That's a situation that Hakan handles over and over and over again, and we don't give much thought to it because it's just common for him to be able to handle that situation, and Aslani just can't.
Well, I remember Irfan was talking about Bastoni and Bissek, and I agree. Bissek was very poor, very weak defensively. I thought he was kind of aimless going forward as well, making the right runs and not making the right passes. Bastoni, I agree, was just absolutely exhausted from about the 80th minute. But My main kind of disagreement was regarding Barella. I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks this way, but I thought Barella had a really poor game. I just like when I think back to what Barella did yesterday, can't really remember anything except him getting kind of frustrated, going for a lot of long raking balls. Other than that, like I don't feel like he really did much. So I wasn't against his substitution. If anything, it probably should have come quicker. But I don't know why we're not giving Zielinski more minutes, and not to dump on Aslani, but I think Zielinski is a better option at defensive mid. And wasn't there a game or two he played in that position while Chalanolo was out? I thought he was fine. I thought he
Yeah,
was
he played
more than
against
fine.
Juventus as a regista.
Yeah, and
Yeah, same thing
since
happened
then,
in that match though, guys. He did a good job, no doubt about that. I think he's better than Aslani in that position. Even I'll concede that. But see, this is what happens when you talk about Aslani. You don't talk about the real issues, which is even with Zelensky starting that match, the same thing essentially happened. We had a
yeah,
two-goal lead.
we capitulated two
Yeah,
goal lead.
yeah, same thing.
And I still don't see why Zielinski isn't being played more, just in general. Like he needs more time. He's obviously one of our more technically skilled players. He can play that role, but more to the point, I feel like we're becoming very predictable. I mean, it's good that we have an established lineup, but the way that we play against Milan, we're playing them in a month, by the way. We're playing them on like February 2nd or something. I don't want to see us go and do the exact same shit. You know, I'm not asking for a whole scale revamp of the technical system. We're not at that point yet. We're not like at, ironically, Milan did that and beat us in the first derby where they randomly pulled a 4-4-2 at their ass. But look, we're not at that stage, obviously, but it's clear that they not only have a mental edge now against us, but the the tactics that we want to employ against Milan are not working the way that we want them to. And I don't know if it's a case of if we just apply them better or if we just execute better, we'll win, because I don't know what more we can really do. You know, maybe we can score some of the chances. Maybe with Thuram back, we'll have more pace to stretch them. But like realistically, the way we play is the way we play. And even with the deficiencies and the missing personnel yesterday, we still had good chances. We still couldn't finish them, and that's not going to change regardless of who's on the pitch. You know, our finishing rate
Yeah,
is always kind of historically poor, and the defensive issues are going to remain the same. You know, Thuram being on the pitch does not change. You know, Bisek or Pavard getting slaughtered by Liao, it's not going to change the team's kind of mental incapability of just maintaining the lead. And I don't want to go back to the beginning of the conversation, but I really just want to bring attention to what Andrew mentioned at the beginning, that this habit of conceding late goals is probably the single biggest takeaway from the entire episode today for me. Most of the goals we've conceded this season have come in the last 15 minutes, which is the exact opposite of the way things were last season. That to me just says mental fragility. You can't hold on. That is the definition of being unable to hold on. And how do you expect to win big games like that if that's the case?
yeah, that's
I do just
definitely the
want to say one
concern.
thing because
Yeah,
one thing I want to say real quick, Irfan, because I want to make sure that we're dealing in facts here. Just remember in that Juventus game that both of those goals that were scored late were after Zelensky was off the pitch because he came off in the 63rd minute, and then we brought Fratesi in. So I just want to make sure
yeah.
that
My point is
we're
Aslani
clear.
wasn't there. Yeah, yeah. My point is
Well,
Aslani
okay,
wasn't
that's
there,
fair.
right? So you
That's fair.
can't blame
Aslani
him for
wasn't
the
there,
two
right?
goals. Yeah,
No,
no,
I agree with that 100%. You can't blame Aslani for those two goals, but I do think that when we're saying that somebody's supposed to be our backup for a certain position, and we're moving guys out of different positions to be the backup there, I think that that does show a weakness in our squad, right, and a weakness in our rotation. And ultimately, Aslani is that weakness. And on top of that, the third goal yesterday was also he was also involved in that as well. So I understand what you're saying, that not everything is Aslani's fault, but there are certain things that are also Aslani's fault. And I just want to make sure that
sure.
I just want to be clear on that,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
just how I feel about the situation.
Yeah, no, I agree, Sterling. And like I said, look, you have more nuance in your Aslani criticism than I hear from most people, so I don't disagree with it. Ultimately, I think, look, my only point about Aslani is that every time we talk about Aslani, we're not talking about all the other stuff that we need to talk about, which is some of the real issues. And I think Jay was mentioning this, Andrew, you started with this, which is that against really good teams, we have to figure out a better way to close out matches. And I think part of it is mentality, but I think this is the one kind of deficiency that Inzaghi has that he needs to work on and he needs to prove to us that he can do. And that is his late game management, especially with the lead or if we need a goal. We don't find ourselves in those positions that often, but he needs to do a better job of that because that seems to be a systemic issue in the club. And he's got to figure something out mentally, tactically, whatever it is to get us over the hump on that. Otherwise, we're going to suffer down the stretch.
A big reason why we're struggling in two facets of the game, for me, boil down to the lack of squad pace. When you're playing a team like Milan, they're one of the only teams in the league who are quick enough and skilled enough, just run at you, come at you. And we saw this against Juve as well. I don't think they're as good at this, but Yildiz is obviously very talented and capable of this, which is the guys who can pick up a ball, challenge a defender one-on-one, create a chance on the break. We do not have any speed in our back line. Our defense is extremely slow. Bastoni is not a quick player. Whoever's in the middle is never going to be fast. And say what you want about Bisek, but it's not like he's winning any sprints. So you have this like slow defensive team. And when you aren't keeping a low block and when you're looking for a winner or you're looking for an equalizer, if you're playing open and free football, you're going to leave yourself exposed. And that's what's happened to us against Milan. And that's what's happened to us against Juve this year. We weren't keeping a low block. We were trying to push up the pitch, trying to create goals. And it led to us just being dominated in the back ends. And the reason why Inzaghi has a hesitancy to sit back and counter is because this team is not built for counter-attacking football because our attackers are too slow. Taremi and Lautaro are not fast as you compare to other forwards in the world. Not having thuram is a big loss, and obviously we have no pace coming in off the bench. So you're slow on the back line, you're slow on the front line. It puts you in a paradox. You can't keep a low block and you can't counterattack because there's not a team you're capable of catching out. And you can't track back quick enough if you commit numbers to score a goal. I think we conceded it pretty much immediately after Dumfries missing that great chance he had at the end of the match. And it was an example of us being stretched deep. So as you look at like what this team needs to fix the issue with conceding late goals, the issue with not being able to finish matches, it's an injection of pace. And not to veer us too far off course, but fast players cost more money than slow players. Like, this is not a novel finding. Like, if you want a young, pacey defender who is good at man marking, you're looking at a $50 million player. Like, there's a premium on these guys, and we just don't have the money to go out and acquire them.
Yeah, and look, it's a common denominator. Like, there's no big team out there in the world that just uniformly lacks pace to the extreme dearth that we do. I remember seeing this video about dribbling, and I think we have the lowest kind of dribbling rate in any of the big teams, maybe in any of the big leagues in Europe. And in a way, I kind of like the reliance we have on passing and movement as opposed to and team structure and shape as opposed to relying on individual brilliance. But again, these are the things that make a difference at the top level. If every Champions League winning team, if every team that is consistently competing at that Champions League semi-final kind of level has those players, then it's a case of there's a case of both correlation and causation there as well. You've got your Gnabry's and your Sané's with Bayern Munich, your Salah's with Liverpool, your Vinicius and Rafinha for Madrid and Barca respectively. Whatever, you get my point. I don't need to list off all these players, but the big teams have incisive, technically razor-sharp players who are fast, and we seem to be the only big team out there that just either refuses to try these players. And it's not only a case of budget, because we can't go out and we can't buy Vinicius from Real Madrid, we can't even buy Lookman from Atalanta, right? But what's to stop us looking for these players with the kind of money that we're wasting on fucking Joseph Martinez and Thomas Palacios? That's 20-something million there, throwing the money from Buchanan. We could have easily tried to find our own Lookman. We could have easily tried to find our own, Leao for that kind of money. Someone made a great point that Pulisic and Reinders cost Milan 40 million in total. We spent that money on Fratesi alone, We spent close to that on Buchanan, Palacios, and Martinez. It's the kind of these kinds of defeats are always fun because they really make you dig the self-inflicted wound even deeper and explore absolutely everything wrong. But I think sometimes that kind of examination is needed because I think periods of good form can kind of paper over cracks as well. So obviously, we're back to the important games now in the season, but I'm concerned because what that Supercoppa loss showed us is we can't rely on some players. There's an inability to maintain composure against some teams. We have fitness issues, I think. Like, I don't understand how. I don't think it's just a question of motivation, but I don't understand how we just seem so unfit compared to Milan. And we've got Inzaghi himself, so we've got 6 games in 18 days. So it's going to be a very, very intense stretch.
Yeah, I think one of the pace point especially is also good because, this is something that's, I think, run over from last year as well. You remember Atletico Madrid did this to us last year with Depay. Like, we had no way of handling that kind of, and it was like pure speed and technique, right? That just completely owned us when we gave up that goal to him. And then Xerxes did that to us last year too, down the stretch with Bologna. And that was a big issue for us there as well. And then again, going back to Asllani, this is one of the things I think that frustrates a lot of people about Asllani too, is he's just not fast. He's extremely slow for somebody who's supposedly fairly athletic. He's just not very fast. And so the speed thing, I think, is one of the biggest issues. You're right, Andrew. And I think one of the things that worries me is I'm not sure if the team is really aware that it's such a massive, colossal issue because I don't see a lot of effort to address it when we're linked with players or when we're talking about what might go wrong or what might be wrong with the club. It doesn't seem like, focus on pace and speed is one of the things that they even think about or talk about.
And just as we're talking about the characteristics of the squad, I think part of the reason why people get upset with Asllani isn't necessarily Asllani himself, but that's not the type of player I want playing Regista. I want someone who is better as a pure defensive midfielder who can be that metronome. And a lot of Asllani's skills just aren't suited for the role. Like, if we're going to be bringing someone off the bench to replace Hakan, we need someone who can shut down the midfield, who is like, okay, enough of this.
Yes.
I'm going to come in, I'm going to muck things up defensively. I'm going to hold my ground. Like an example of this, of someone who we could buy if we had like 35 million, would be Rovella. Like that is the type of player he's a little quick. He has some speed to him, but he's physical. He's willing to get dirty, and he can also complete those short lateral passes. Asllani isn't a short lateral pass guy. Asllani is a deep looping cross over the top of the defense, which is it's nice, but that's not the primary thing I'm looking for in the role. And I'm not blaming him for that. He's not. We signed him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Less Pirlo, more Gattuso. I know what you mean.
Yeah, and I've been saying that exact sentiment for the better part of what feels like 5 years. Why is it? I know that football's changed. There aren't any more Gattusos in a way. You know what I mean? We still need.
Even a Fofana, look at what Fofana was for Milan yesterday.
Yeah. Yusuf Fofana was one of the names that I mentioned last year. It's your simple kind of French type DM, you know what I mean? These guys who simple, physical on the ball, physical in midfield, simple passing, but can stride forward and have the kind of wherewithal to make the occasional creative forward pass. That's all I'm after. And there's a lot of them around. Obviously, Fofana was one of the better ones at Monaco for a couple of years, but there are plenty of these players around. And we just, I don't know, we don't seem to appreciate that mold of player, even though I think there's a real role for them in the squad. And I think the midfield will be a lot more balanced with a kind of linchpin like that, even if, he's not doing much in the way of like attacking or anything like that. If he's helping us retain possession, if he's helping us defend, and if he can make a tangible difference when brought on in terms of security, then that's an enormous boon to us. And the loss has really kind of shone a light on the kind of inefficiencies and the poor recruitment in some areas, I think.
So maybe to end on a positive note here, one thing I will say is that we did get goals yesterday from Lautaro and Taremi. I think that's important moving forward. We do need Taremi to start scoring goals. I think his all-around play has been pretty decent this year, and it was good yesterday, actually. I thought that he actually had a pretty good match, and obviously he took the goal extremely well, so that's a good sign for things going forward. And Lautaro is back to scoring as well. That's now 2 goals in 3. So, I don't think that you can say that he's in a drought anymore. And obviously that's the most important thing for this team moving forward. And listen, I know this has been a doom and gloom podcast, but before this match, we still were on a hot streak. We have Venezia up next, so hopefully we can get back into a good winning run. And listen, when we have our starters, we are still a very, very, very good team. It's only once we have to start making changes that things can sometimes get a little bit scary for us. So if we can get everybody fit and firing, we're still pretty dangerous. And don't forget, we still didn't have Pavard and Iturbi yesterday to start the match, who are 2 genuine starters, along with obviously Thuram. So, I don't think that there's any reason to panic by any means, but yeah, still a lot of the things that we talked about today obviously are real issues within the squad that hopefully will be addressed in the future. So I'll leave it at that.
We have a good soft landing spot here with possibly the worst team in the league in Venezia coming up next. Just looking ahead in the fixture list, you've got Bologna, who's pretty good, Empoli. Like this, we can find our footing here. If we're missing Thuram, if we're missing Hakan, there's going to be a possibility to still pick up full points. Jay nailed it. The derby in early February is our next big game in the league. So all our goals are still in front of us. We're still Scudetto favorites. I just think when you only have 2 losses in a calendar year against Italian teams and they're both to Milan, it's always going to be a bitter taste in your mouth, especially when you go 6 in a row or whatever it was without losing to them. So they're adjusting to a more normal derby pattern where it's actually a rivalry. It's actually back and forth. It's not so one-sided.
Adjusting to Milan being red. I told you this is the dawn of a new era. This is basically back to pre-Calciopoli days where we were the 3rd biggest team in Italy. This is back to the way it always has been.
If Miko could hear this, if Miko was hearing this right now.
Miko's rolling in his grave right now.
Yeah.
Do you think we can convince Milan to buy Taremi and reunite Conceição with Taremi?
Maybe a straight swap for Pulisic. Just put me out of my misery.
Yeah, I'd be terrified to think who we'd bring in if we let go of Taremi right
now. Aqua Fresca, is he still around?
He's somewhere. Destro.
Oh yes,
yeah. Destro. Yeah. Who's the guy who plays for Milan Futuro now? Who used to play for us? Oh man, he went on like 6 different loan spells and like kicked around for forever.
Alabek?
I cannot remember his name.
Longo?
No, not Alabek. Longo, I think it was Longo. Yes,
that's Longo. Oh man,
you're bringing Longo in for our 3rd.
Just want to say, Sebastiano Esposito has more goals than Lautaro this season.
Hey, Lautaro's back now, man. The streak is starting. He's going to score in bunches. Here, in new year,
I hope
new
this
him.
makes the team angry, though. I really do. I hope this really angers the team and that we see some fire and that we stop taking these Milan derbies like they're for granted.
Yeah, Barella looked pretty pissed. So,
what was that about? He came off and he was like shouting. He was pointing at the bench and shouting at someone.
Yeah, I don't know.
For some reason, I thought he was yelling at Arnautovic for some reason.
He was yelling at Hakan for going off injured and subjecting us to money.
I'll let that go. But yeah, maybe. Shit, he definitely looked pissed.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up. I gotta go to work.
All right.
We don't have Miko to send us off.
Forza Milan.
Forza Inter.
Poor Miko.
Hey,
if Miko's not dead already, he's gonna listen to this episode and pass out.
We should let him just start the next episode with like a 10-minute rant against us.
Hey, no freebies. You're too embarrassed to show your face in the most important episode of the season. I can't guarantee playing time next episode.
That's true.
All right. I'll catch you all next week.
See ya.
All right, guys.